Welcome to the January 29th City Council Workshop. First order of business. All the information that the councilors have here, the policies, the proposals, whatever, are on the city website. So you have a chance to read all this stuff before the meeting. That way you can do public input. So at this time, is there any public input on any of these items right here? All right, seeing none. First order of business, wage and classification policy.
Mayor and Council, we've drafted a new policy after a lot of discussion, and even in the past few hours I've had additional comments come into me from department heads from what were previously given to me. So this is a draft policy, and want to just bring it to you tonight to start some more discussion with you and go through it a little bit, see if you've got any questions or concerns, and go back and redraft things that may need to be tweaked, and hopefully get us that one step closer to getting a revised policy in place. So if you'd want to just start throwing questions out or discussion, we can do that however you'd like, Mayor.
My first question was, why did we go from 6 to 10,000 population to 7 to 12?
It's a good question. I guess my thoughts on that are the potential loss of employees is not typically to communities that are lower in population or smaller in size to us, and so the market that we're really comparing ourselves against would be that market that we could lose people to. And so that 7 to 12,000 range is a little more indicative of cities, and cities with services similar to ours. And so that's why I've recommended 7 to 12,000, but certainly you as a council could.
Did you check how far out of whack we are if we include those larger towns?
Really, from 6 to 15,000, you don't really pick up any more communities than what the system already have in place. You might get a couple, but in the policy right now, we've also drafted that even though they might be a larger community, we're still going to put a heavier weight to those that are in closer proximity to Caribou. Not just because they're included in that category, we're going to say that's what we need to be looking at.
Patrick?
So you mentioned it's a draft. Is it also partial? It only goes to 5. Five bullet points. Is there anything in the policy beyond the 3-year step? In other words, it talks about going from 0 to 3.
Right.
Just stipends. In other words, is there going to be more of the policy that stipulates what happens beyond year 3?
So you're talking about the Part 2A, Roman numeral 1, or I. Another good question. We've established that, at least right now, the policy establishes that we're going to base our compensation off of the averages that get determined by the salary survey. And so the question is, do we base all of our wages off the averages and then also start creating to where we're going to bump up the average ourselves because we'd be including ourselves in the survey, or do we not include ourselves in the survey? But in which case people are going to compare themselves against us for our averages as well. It really is a question of, if you start getting above average, what is the basis for compensating somebody above average wage? Is it, I know there's been discussion of just the longevity component of they've been with us that long and so we should bump them up. Or there's are they working above average and performing above average, doing things above average to where they weren't getting paid above average, at which point you're now into a merit-based system, which we don't have in place. And so again, it's a discussion of, are we looking at merit-based beyond that 3 years, or are we looking at a longevity compensation just because they've been here, they've had the training, and we don't want to lose them, we're going to bump them up above the average. That's a policy matter, I guess, that we throw out to you.
So the only people getting a COLA are the people that have 3 years or more?
And that was brought up this afternoon as well. I believe the intent is that all employees would get a COLA, and so we would need to reword that one. And the COLA would be based on the budget and the budget numbers that the council sets, and so that could be 0.1 1 year, it could be 0. If the COLA was 3, you may only give 2. It's up for parts of the budget discussion.
Now, what about the part where if a person's average is above average, the employee's wages will not be docked? Okay, I find that reasonable, but do they still get a COLA as large as the other people?
I heard that question this morning, and I guess it comes to a question again of if we are giving percentages above average, then the assumption is that they need to be staying that, for instance, if they was at year 4 and we gave them a 2% longevity bump, you're now 2% above average. Well, if the average salary comes back and they're still 2% above average and a COLA is budgeted, shouldn't they still get the COLA because you've already determined that they should be 2% above average because of longevity or merit? And so I would say yes.
But that's not part of the proposal. You don't have a year 4.
Well, they would get COLAs after year 3.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilor McDonough?
Yeah. Under item 1, the statement about some positions may be more susceptible to influence by non-municipal employee markets. Human Resource Director may also consider information about these markets when completing comparison and analysis. Is the NERSHA, which I think is a Northeast Region classification program, does that include those markets of non-municipal employments? Because when the previous wage and classification was put together, there was no non-municipal data compiled, so we weren't looking at that. And if we're going to be comparing municipality to municipality, then there should be no reason for us to go outside the municipalities.
So the 2008 study, or the last one that we did that we've been trying to get away from,
Yeah.
it referenced the human resource salary survey system that I believe you're referring to.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked into that enough to know what is included in that, what is not. I think
I scratched my head on that still because there was no data included. Well, at least when I left in 2007, there was no data included to be compared with what we were doing. Okay, and it wasn't long after that that they basically approved it. It finally got approved in August. So I'm just saying.
I think for the most part, most municipal positions, you're going to be able to compare with the municipal or MMA survey.
Right.
It's more those positions, really the only ones I can think of, there might be an issue would be your truck drivers with public works that get pulled away into the private market.
Yeah, but that's union. That's government by contract with the union. All right, so that's not even included in this.
And that's true.
Okay.
So, and the other one that I was thinking of was the police officers that we continually lose to Border Patrol or to the state, and that's also union. So it's
you're not gonna compete with the federal government.
No,
Okay.
we're not.
I mean, and that's a trait with the smaller communities. They train the people and then they move on to bigger and better things. And you can't compete with them, and that's no comparison whatsoever. If you want to compare them to moving to Presque Isle for another $100 a week or a month or something like that, I think I could, live with that, but I just don't, myself, I don't see it. I don't know how the rest of the people think.
So in a sense, we would strike that paragraph referring to use of other markets data.
I would, yeah.
I think if you get a case, excuse me, go ahead.
No, no.
I think if you get a case that you don't have data, you can bring it up as a separate issue to the council.
Okay.
And then as far as the comparisons are concerned, I too question why we went from 6 to 10. I was looking probably more 6 to 9 because realistically that's what you're dealing with also. Again, you're not hiring or losing people to the larger populations. When was the last time somebody left to go someplace else? I mean, if we're going to do a comparison, let's keep it probably, at least close to par for what we are. We're at 7,700 people right now as far as the population. I haven't seen any increases lately, so that's my take on that.
Also on that population, this is statewide, right?
Yes.
Okay. So population with greater weight being applied to those communities closest to Caribou. What is your formula for that? How are you going to do that? Do you have any idea about how you're going to take a ratio or something, or you're just going to look at it and say, because downstate and more affluent towns, you've probably got, I don't know, Freeport or something that's got an actual population of whatever, 10,000 or 9,000, but in the summer it swells and they're affluent because of the tourism and stuff. And if you take what they're making, I don't know what it is, but it's probably more than up here. What kind of weight? Are you going to use a percentage of what? I think there should be a formula to come up with if you're going to use the statewide. Some kind of formula to give, I don't know, maybe 50% or something to Caribou and then so much on the others, on the other towns or whatever. I don't know what that formula would be at this point, but something along that line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That's what we'd have to do is we'd look at, what is the appropriate ratio of,
Right.
as far as cost of living here versus cost of living there.
Right.
And look at, it might be an indicator from the housing market for a similar thing and being able to look at the ratio of costs that way. I know this is a little strange, but there's actually an index for the Big Mac index, the cost of a hamburger here versus a hamburger there. There's different ways of looking at what is that cost difference, and we could tie that down more tightly.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yep.
Do we have a copy of the Maine Municipal Association salary survey?
It's available online, and it's just a query tool that you put in. We want municipalities of this size, and it spits back the information to you.
So, we have not then determined what communities we're going to use for our comparables, or we have?
It comes down to the population range that you want to consider. If
For the whole state?
if you want to go back to the 6 to 10,000, you narrow
6
it
to
down.
9.
6 to 9,
Yeah.
6 to 10.
I think 6 to 10 is what we used last time.
Right.
The last contract, well, it's not a contract, they're not union. The last raise that these people received 2 years ago was based on this process. When we used the 6 to 10,000, and we used the average in those communities, and they were paid that average, but it was the data's a year old. So they were paid last year's average of what was in these communities. That's how they were based last time, and then the next round, they go to COLA. Is that correct?
Well,
So yes.
I understand your point, and I'd say, I'm really not so much concerned about the population of a community. I could go either way, even to 15,000, that's not, I boil it down to, it's the location of the community that we're talking about. You can go back and now this was the one in '08 that was signed in, and we used Camden, and they only had a population of 5,400. We used Rockland, used Ellsworth, and my favorite was they used Orono. So I just would like to, and I found those communities to be very unfair. I know what they sell hanging baskets for, I know what they sell a dozen ears of corn for, I know what they sell strawberries for, and we can't even come close to what these communities sell things for. So it's the location more than it is the population, and I was just, I guess I'd like them, I don't know what the municipalities are we're using, that's all.
Well, and that kind of speaks to, I think, what Councilmember Terrio was talking about was, do we want to come up with a formula of proximity-based weighting factors for each of these communities? And then, as you say, you could certainly open it up and look at what are the services they have compared to our services, number of employees versus our number of employees.
So then we have not yet determined what communities we're going to use yet.
We did last time. It was all communities between 6 and 8,000, between 6 and 10,000 in population. So as of 2 years ago, our people are not way out of whack as far as the average with those communities. So it's not like it's going to take, you know, $100,000 to put them up to average, because they're close or they're there. The only question is, the rationale behind that was, if we pick population, then we're not going back every time and, oh, let's take this town out and put this town in, and you're inventing the wheel every time. So I guess what the rationale was is try to find a formula that is replicable. So
The last time we had a discussion, I did a poll from 5,000 to 8,000. I pulled 30 communities in that, and of that 12 reported, and the items that we were discussing, when you looked at it and did the comparison in the percentages, they were within $1,000 and $2,000 difference probably at the lines we were looking at. So they were, you may as well say they were at par based on that.
If I'm understanding this correctly, this is all to come up with kind of the jumping off point for any, where any employee would start in year 0. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
anything else?
Yeah, oh yeah, I got more. C item, is that Roman numeral 2, II? Okay. That kind of sort of like, no, I think I'm gonna wait on that one. I still have a question about that.
Okay, let's, generally speaking, is anybody in deep opposition to this?
I would only suggest, can you write a scenario for beyond 3-year merit and longevity? Like how that, you know, as an addition to this draft, and that way we can decide how we want to address beyond 3 year.
So in the 2008 process, it was more merit-based in looking at it. And then we kind of morphed into the longevity discussion. And last year, what the council, had, as I understand, approved was a 2% longevity pay for years 4 and 5. So that at the end of your 5th year working for the city, you would have been 4% above average.
So how come that's not part of your proposal?
It comes down to the discussion of, do we want straight longevity and just give them longevity because they've been here, or do we look at some type of merit-based system for beyond the average wage? It's
So what I'm suggesting is have him propose it in another draft 2 ways, moving forward with longevity or moving forward with merit, and then we can decide, right?
Okay, can we decide on population? I support 6 to 10.
I agree.
You agree? Mr. Gong?
Aye. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. 6 to 10 is fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anything else? I don't have any problems with the rest of it, along with whatever you're going to come up with for the questions that you received. Anyone else?
yeah.
Mr. McDonough?
Item number 3. No, well, I'll save that. Item number 4, under the COLA. If we're gonna do that, I would request that we cap it at not more than 3%. And item number 5, I think that should just be addressed on a case-by-case basis with the personnel committee / council.
so not have it part of the policy at all?
Huh?
Not have it part of the policy, or just,
Yeah, but I addressed at the personnel committee.
okay.
Your 3% COLA, I mean, the council's going to set the COLA with what they can afford. But we gave the union 3.5% last contract. So I hate to treat these people differently.
I didn't think the 3% was bad.
No, it's not.
Okay.
And maybe the cost of living is 5 and we can only afford 4 or 3 or 2, but the council's going to decide it no matter what.
Fine.
Anything else?
What do you generally start
Yeah.
part-time employees? Is it minimum wage for part-time employees, or is there a scale on that too?
It depends on which department they're going into. If it's, for instance, a truck driver in Public Works that's part-time, we still get similar wages to the truck driver that's full-time.
Okay.
A part-time employee that works in the park department that helps with coaching a summer program may just get minimum wage.
I mean, we have people in the library that are part-time, but
Right.
they're full-time, part-time, or whatever, so
Right.
that,
So you don't have just a one
Right.
set.
Right.
that you've got to-
Right?
And when we do get to the point where we're gonna implement this, I would like for it to become part of the administrative policy and not delete, but just reflect that this is replacing the wage and classification program that was established in 2008.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I would actually like to see this get adopted into the administrative code that's online that we have with our charter and all of our ordinances, so
Right.
it's clear. Yeah,
And the current policy would remain as a historical element of that.
okay.
Anything else? So you have enough to bring something back in next meeting or the meeting after?
I have enough to, yep, throw that one out. We'll get
And when
going.
and when you do, could you, for those that have never seen it, bring a list of all the towns between 6 and 10 with a spreadsheet type thing?
I actually was gonna just pull that up real quick, if you want
Okay.
to bear with me for just a second. So this, I didn't go over it, just a second. So the salary survey, not anybody can get into this. You have to have a special login and approval from Maine Municipal Association to get into it. But generally, it is all public information, which somebody could request if they wanted to. But you can come in and you can, for instance, pull administrative salaries, the manager, and indicate the different roles that they have, the number of hours that they work, and be able to start comparing this position with anybody else. And you can add filters to it. You could say, we want to change this so it's only in Aroostook County. And it would pull up all the information just for Aroostook County. Or you can add the population element to it. And by adding those filters, it will kick out the relative spread of information that you've asked for. So an hourly pay rate for that particular administrative position ranges from $28 to $48 an hour, or an annual salary of $58 to almost $100,000, with stipends ranging from $600 to $6,000. And you can pick which municipalities you actually want to have in there, again by the county or the population, and then as you run the reports, it will tell you the cities that would be all included in that. Or another easy way, if you just say cities that are 6 to 10,000, most people would just go to Wikipedia, cities in Maine, and look up their population. That would give you a snapshot for what those cities are.
You can't bring up the rest of it?
Which part?
Well, this portal is really only by position,
Right.
right? So you don't really know what the cities are.
I'm sure there's another place to export that data, and
There's one of those things you click on and it pops up all the communities, and then you go in and filter it out. I forget because I'm not doing it.
yeah, and I'm sure they've got that in there, and I'll
Yeah,
make
so-
sure we get the list by the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay then, second item on the agenda was what? Safety building.
Can you turn your microphones up a little bit? Can't hear them. Put your microphone.
Does it even pipe into this
Don't
room?
look at me that way. You're
It's-
sitting right there. We can't hear you here.
The microphones are for the internet system. It doesn't actually pipe back into this room.
Speak up then. Here.
The public safety building, the building facilities committee met, and we had Joan and or Councilmember Kirkpatrick and Terry there, and Councilmember Coate was not able to make it, but we had a lengthy discussion on different issues from what studies have been done in the past, where we want to go in the future, what kind of public involvement we want to have. And maybe with that, I would just turn it over to the council members that were part of that discussion, and maybe they can lead it here out.
We talked about which would be the best way to go, just a police station, because the police department is actually what's in more of need right now for, well, not even, I don't think renovations would do it. I think we'd need a new building or whatever, or should we go with a new safety building? Chief Susie and Chief Gahagan and Sergeant Gahagan were there to give us some insight on grants that are available, cost. The architects have come up with approximately an $8 million cost. There's a grant available for 55%. I think Sergeant Gahagan talked with JCAM at NMDC, and Mr. Cam felt that Caribou did qualify for a grant. Talked about the location, when to put it on the ballot, how to put it on the ballot, how to word it, because we still have to apply for a grant. I think the consensus at the time was that we probably should work on the entire safety building rather than just build or try to find a location for the police department, because that's been researched. And if any repairs or anything that would be made on the fire station would open up a larger can of worms as far as the disability, the American Disability Association Act would come into play as far as anything going up like that. So we thought that the best way to go would be to apply for a grant, put it on the ballot for hopefully in June, that if we got the grant, would the population support a new fire station at the Birdseye site. There's a packet here that I didn't have copies for everybody, but that both chiefs came up with. There were a lot of questions and questions here, and this packet has answers. I don't know if that's on, this didn't get on the website, did it? Because I don't think you had it electronically or something. So, okay, but there are a lot of answers here if you want to go through them or whatever. I don't know.
I apologize. I thought you had hard copies that you were going to be passing out
I had
tonight.
3, and I did give them. I had 3 that I gave one to the mayor and one to Nicole and Phil, and that's all I had. But there are, for the counselors to see, we could get some extra copies if they, but the questions have been answered. The ambulance study is in here that we did a few years ago. And of course there's, I think, did they all get? Yes. They all got this, okay. So, questions, whatever. The chiefs are here.
These questions were brought up at your committee meeting.
They were, and they're questions that
That came from whom?
general,
Well, I mean,
you know,
the
some
general
from-
population is going to have the same questions, so how do we get this information out? Do we put an article in the paper with frequently asked questions about?
we could. They
talked
talked about how to get this information out. They talked about the television, articles in the paper, having tours through both the fire department and the police department, and of course putting this information online. And an informational meeting like this one is.
I personally think that June is too soon to educate. I mean, I think we need to back up a step. We have a committee, the building committee. I think we should expand the committee for this one purpose and ask townspeople that want to attend, whether they're for or against or indifferent or just want to learn. So I'd like to see us put an ad in the Republican asking for people, and then setting up a meeting or two in the evening or on a Saturday afternoon, whatever.
Asking for people to serve,
To-
to be a
serve,
member on
to serve,
the
or,
building
right,
committee.
or,
whatever.
and then
Yeah.
publicize when we're meeting, and anybody from the public that wants to attend can attend.
Yeah.
Like have it at the rec or somewhere.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, because there is need for the public to get answers and,
Well, you know, it took us, how old's the new public safety building?
The fire station,
No, not public safety, public works,
30 years old.
30 years. And that took what, 3 or 4 referendums? It took at least 3.
It was before my time, so.
Yeah.
But you're right, Dave.
So, and the rec took a couple, we did a couple times, and so I'm thinking that more people would be receptive to this than to like the rec, or some people don't use the rec or whatever. But I think we need to educate the public a lot more before we ask them to vote. And if we can do that
And
between
that's
now
what-
and June, that's fine.
that's what their plan was, to really educate the people in the time that,
Then let's ask for some people. Let's set up a meeting where the committee of 8 or 10 or whatever it is meets, and the public be invited to attend and go through these types of
Yeah.
questions. Because I've had somebody ask me, why build it there and not there and this and that. Chief?
One of the concerns, just to be mindful, is that just to apply for the grant,
right,
we have to ask for the council's permission, and it'll take 6 to 9 months to hear the outcome of just the grant. So and that's something that we can apply for once you give us permission, and it doesn't mean that we have to accept it.
All right, but let's say you get you receive the grant. We haven't voted yet. Okay?
That just means that you don't have to take it. So if the public says, no, we don't want to do that.
No, but how long is that grant going to be good for? I mean, let's say you get a grant.
Yeah.
You have to take it within X amount of time.
Well, just our bird's eye grant, we didn't have to utilize it for almost a year. So I would assume that that'd be on the same, but I could really find out for you. Just, that's the only thing is just, we have to have your permission to apply for the grant.
It depends on the pot of money that the grant money is coming from, first of all, as far as time constraints. And then it depends on when it's obligated, because it may not necessarily be obligated upon acceptance, and so you have a certain period of time, okay, to confirm yes or no, we are going to accept it. Once you accept it, it goes through the obligatory process, and then you have a certain amount of time after the dollars are obligated to start spending. So it could be, if it's no year money, they might just put a 2 or a 3 year period on it once the money is obligated. It can be approved, but not obligated, okay?
Okay, but
So just so you'll have some understanding about the
so
money.
Chief, would you want to know that you have a grant before you ask the public? Or would you want to ask them before, hoping you get one?
I would think if we could show to the public that we have 55% of the cost already earmarked from the government, it would go a lot better to the public accepting the amount whatever we choose versus not knowing.
So it's not feasible to be voting on this in June? I mean, I don't know how long it takes to get these grants.
Yeah, but it's, like I said, it's just that you give us permission to apply for the grant. That's the timeline that we're looking at.
No, we can't do that at this meeting, right?
Not in a formal action, but you could certainly give them direction to move
I
forward.
don't see personally, I don't see anything wrong with applying for a grant. And if we can't have it, then we don't have it, but Joe?
We can make that official at the next
Okay.
council
No.
meeting.
Right.
You don't want to apply for the grant?
Not at this present time. I didn't even get a copy. I don't know where all the questions are.
There's some.
Yeah, well, for the first time.
You okay to apply?
No, we were at this last meeting, I understood that it was up to 55%,
Correct.
and it was only for the fire side.
Now, once we looked at the grant, it could be for police, fire, public safety.
Or combined, okay. One of the things I had mentioned in the meeting that I think would be helpful is a critical path. Like how we understand that it's all gonna move forward now. I guess this is part of it.
Well, the thing is, if it's gonna take 8 or 9 months to get a grant, or find out if you do, doesn't mean we're gonna sit here and wait for that. I mean, there's a lot of these questions, and a lot of this work can be done. And if they get the grant, and you're ready, fine. If they don't get the grant, then you look at Plan B. But you don't have to accept the grant, so.
Potentially go on the November ballot? I mean, if you would know, potentially by then.
It would work better educating the public
Right, you
in
have
first,
time.
in the November versus a June. It's just, I don't want to rush the public. I want them to understand
Right.
what we're working with and working without. So it's an education process. Like I said, really the big thing for us is to get your approval to just apply for the grant.
Councilman McDonough, you in favor of allowing them to apply for the grant?
Are we gonna apply for it for both, for the public services facility, or are we gonna apply for it for the police department only?
No, I was thinking public safety building.
That's with the.
I think, if I might, that's one of the main questions that we're starting to hear now, at least in the last couple of weeks, is do we need a full public safety building, or do we just need a new police station versus the whole thing? And I guess that's one of those questions we've asked the architect through the study that the council approved to bring back some numbers and give us an idea of what costs were going to be, what the different aspects of the building would be, and certainly we can I'm going to be meeting with them later this week, and we can say, give us an idea of what it would be just for a police station versus the whole thing, and we can get that out of the study and maybe make that decision another time.
I don't wanna slight the process, but going into this, the original need, and I'm gonna base it on the need, is the police department. And at the time when we went into this, we were under the impression that the police department couldn't apply for any grants, and that there was a stronger possibility that if we combined them, then with the fire department be there, the opportunity to receive the grant would be better. But now that we know that they can put in for it independently and not have to worry about the fire department, I think that's maybe the way we should probably look at this, is that the need versus, you know, the want or the nice to have.
Well, and for that matter, it can be applied toward a new city hall. I mean, you could take everything out of this building and put it into a new building under the grant funding. So it comes down to, again,
You don't need a new city hall.
it's that wants versus needs, and right,
Okay.
yeah.
The police department has a need. Okay. And I'm not denying that. I don't mind submitting for the grant, but I would like to have a clear path as to where we're going with it, that's all.
Well, it's all stuff we have to research, but I think things can be done at the same time.
Yeah.
Oftentimes with the grants, you can also submit that this is you can basically submit for the whole enchilada if you did for the whole thing, and you can always scale the project back. If you scale the project back, then the grant award also would be scaled back proportionally, and they may say the scope of your project has changed to the extent that we may take more than just a little off the top in order, because you've changed the scope. But they could just say you've gone from a $9 million project to a $4 million project, and they still may give you 2.2 million, or the 55%. We don't know, but usually it's best to apply for the larger amount and scale back if you need to.
And then we have maybe some existing structures that we could use for that too, depending if they meet the, so, there's a lot of different parameters to look at, whereas before, you can't combine both of those facilities over there. It's understandable, but that's all I'm looking at.
And so that gets to the question of, do we need, I think there's an understanding that there needs to be a new police station. But if you build a new police station, and then you also add on to the fire station to meet its needs, what's that combined cost relative to building a brand new facility? And that's part of, I think, what we need to get out of this study from the architect is some of that side-by-side comparison in actual dollar figures. And I know that some of that work's already been done, and the chiefs have some of that information that I don't believe is even in this FAQ that's been provided. And so part of what we'd like to do is put an FAQ website together on the city's page, and we'd have links to all these past studies that have been done, numbers that have been provided, as well as some of the narrative that you have. So it's going to take a lot of information to get out there and make sure everybody knows what's been looked at and why things might be being considered the way they are.
So I think we have consensus that it's okay to apply. So you can add that to your agenda, and then we'll work on maybe increasing the committee size and having public input or public information sessions and so forth. And I think there's a need for a new fire station, but if the chief, Susie, needs to really show us why, and I'm sure you will be working on that. Now, if we have a public safety building, what does that do for dispatch? Anything?
Well, they'll do anything that you want it to do.
No, but I mean, do we still need a police officer on the third shift as opposed to the police officer sitting in the police building or being out?
Since we don't have any civilians and we have everything's police officers, that would reduce our force, which we don't want to reduce the force from what we have now. We would still have to man the jail. So we'd still have to have that officer at the station.
Okay. Well, these are questions for another time, but can a fire person that's there be trained to watch a jail? I mean, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Anything else?
That's another question that we haven't heard yet, but it's a good one. And if you hear other questions through your dialogue or your communications with the public, let us know, and we can add it to the list of questions and try to get answers for you.
You're going to advertise to the public to set up a committee?
It'll be in the Aristic Republican.
Now, what's this committee going to do?
Excuse me.
What's it going to make up?
Excuse me.
Explain to us what it's about.
All of this information is on the website. You have a chance to read it before the meetings.
I'm not smart enough to run a computer.
Then,
I got to listen to you.
then you can use public input to share your thoughts and feelings about what we're going to discuss. That's how it's going to work. I'm sorry.
Listen, after hearing Chief Cahagan here wanting to apply for a grant to bribe the public to vote for it, so they get a grant.
Mr. Martin, you're out of order. That's enough.
That's not out of order.
Chief,
I want you to explain to us what you want, what you're gonna do. Are you gonna set up a committee with private sector people on there?
He's asking
Huh?
Only in public comment, okay?
I'm giving you a public
It's
comment,
not-
I'm
it's
part
not
of the
that.
public.
It's not. Begin.
There's, gee, you got to talk.
All right, the next order of business is a city policy on the disposition of surplus property.
Mayor and council, we met as department heads and had a lengthy discussion on what's been happening with disposal of surplus goods and what we can do to be a little more open to the public about what can be surplused or what has been surplused, and also meeting the obligation that you would have to be mindful of what's being declared surplus and how to dispose of that. And again, a draft proposal that we've put together, basically 6 points that we would look at. Basically, it creates a threshold system where if an item is surplused, either because it's out-of-date equipment that we can no longer use, or it's being replaced with newer equipment, or it's just something we don't need anymore, then we'd be able to surplus it. Right now, what we've drafted is that if it has a value less than $500, the department heads would just take care of it as in the most efficient way possible, most economical way possible, but leave that up to the department heads. If it has a market value greater than $500, then the city would compile that into a list, which we'd put on the city's website, being available for purchase by the public on a first-come, first-served basis, and sold as is. If it doesn't get sold off the website, then the department head that surplused it, again, they could dispose of it as they feel it would be most appropriate. Then we have items that the city considers fixed assets, and that we have insurance on those items. Might be cars, trucks, certain types of equipment, that before that could go onto the website, it'd have to be brought to the city council for your action on those items. And of course, all of these items would have to be disposed of in accordance with funding stipulations. If we, for instance, if we bought it with some, if the library, for instance, bought some equipment with some trust funds that had stipulations on the purchase of the equipment, that she could only dispose of that in accordance with those dollars and what might be tied to those dollars, or grant funds that we may have used, whatever. If it's evidence or things that we've acquired by legal action or court action, then we have to abide by the legal process to dispose of those items. The last one, this is one that I know the department heads have requested, and I've kind of had some second thoughts about this over the course of the day, but right now the way it reads is the proceeds from the sale of any surplus item shall be put into general equipment reserves for the respective department from which the surplus item was received. I guess the thought being there, if it came out of that department, anything should go back into the department. But at the same time, anything that goes into that department usually came in from the general funds of the city at some point, and should those funds then come back into the general revenues of the city to be allocated back out as through the budget process or allocations that way. So number 6, I think, is a little more up in the air, but everything else we felt pretty confident about to bring to you tonight. It is, again, draft and for your discussion.
Can we put any surplus item out to the public? Any and all items out to the public?
That's what you want.
Disposal?
If that's what you want us to do.
You mean like non-fixed asset type?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd rather see it go that way. That way,
So, for instance, the 9 council chairs that are now surplus, do we put that out to bid for the public?
Yeah.
Or do
or throw them away, one or the other, you know?
we, right?
So
And then, I had one other.
Phil, you're talking like high bid?
Yeah,
Just put it all out to bid by the public?
yeah. If there's some value to it, then let's sell it, okay, to anybody that wants it.
Yeah, but I don't think number one says they're gonna throw it away. It says they can sell it. I mean, that's the way I understood it.
I understood it that way too,
Okay.
okay? And then, and how are we gonna determine the value of the items?
Most items that have any value at all, you'd be able to go to a local retailer and say, how much would this probably be worth? And get an idea, get a ballpark.
So we should define that in there, that
I think it does.
value will be determined based on whatever. I mean, like if you're gonna get rid of a vehicle, as an example, you'd go to an ADA book or something like that and get or check the market and see what they're selling for in the market.
Yeah. And those would be, something that large would be on the fixed asset list that we'd have to bring to you anyways with them. Yep.
And as far as the accounting, can't that just like be a receipt, journal entry, and move it into that line?
Into the general revenue of the city.
Bring it into the revenue and then earmark it to go back into that line, or just do a journal entry and move it? Can you do that?
We can receive it right into any line that you want. So if you want to go back into a reserve account, we can receive it right in there.
As long as it just shows the trail.
Oh,
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
So on 2B, all I wanted to mention was that for these $500 and less items, if you make it first come first serve, how do you keep somebody from just sniping that and not doing it as a if you do it as a bid process with a reserve, it'll keep somebody from just sniping that website. Not that you're going to be putting stuff out there a lot, but if you do it on a bid basis, that
Could you define that? What is that?
that's like an eBay term where people just keep their eye on it and just like look for stuff when it comes on and just it's called sniping.
I think if you listed it as the fair market value, if you had 9 chairs and you wanted to sell the 9 chairs for $20 a piece, you could list it as $20. And the first person that comes along that made the offer of $20, you can sell it. It wasn't start a bid at 1 cent and let it go to 2 cents and 5 cents and $2. Put a fair market value on anything that you list, and the first person that comes along that wants it, let them take it.
Or save it all up for the citywide garage sale and put it in there.
That doesn't, we tried that same lifeguard sale. So that doesn't-
The intent here was not to have a bid process.
Stay away from
It was just to say, this is our fair market value,
Put a price
give it
on
to
it
us or
first.
not.
Yeah.
And that way we can move things faster, we don't have to store it as long.
Fair enough.
I agreed with what you recommended for number 6, to just put it in the general revenue, and then if there's a need, then to be able to use those funds for a different department, rather than it going back to where the items were sold from. But, I mean, I think that would all depend on need.
We had some discussion, the finance director and I earlier, that we could certainly say if it's a large piece of equipment or a vehicle that you're surplusing, and the surplus component is to trade it in for a new vehicle, that's going to be brought to the council, and that certainly would go directly back to the benefit of that department. But other items, we could put in the general.
Anything else? Councilor Gong.
Several concerns, but I guess they can all be answered with taking it to one more step. I'm just concerned that we have however many departments, all at their discretion. I don't know why these can't be recommendations and then have the city manager's position sign off on this. So that even though it's indirect, the council still has some kind of say as this process goes forward. So I don't know if this is a job description that the department head should have. It's not that they shouldn't have it, it's just that we don't have that form of government. We have a city council form of government where we hire a city manager to run the show. And I believe we've missed a step here by not letting the city manager, whoever he or she is, make sure, and it can be done on the recommendations of the department heads. You can follow this, but it's still, I believe it still ought to be signed off by the person who we hire to run our city, and that would be the city manager, and not have 7 or 10 different individuals out there conducting business of the city. So I have problems with this, but it could all be eliminated if we had one person making the decision.
Final approval.
Final approval,
Yeah.
whatever the correct
Yep.
diplomatic terminology is.
So for instance, under number 1, instead of department heads, it would just be city manager.
It could be as simple as department head calls the manager, says, I have these items, and you say, yep, go ahead, sell them.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely, just, if there's an issue, as a city councilor, I can't go to department heads. I can go to my city manager, and I can ask for explanations.
Sure.
That's the chain of command that we govern here under. This deviates a little from that as it's written.
I don't have a problem with that.
Anything else? Okay, next item, city policy on returned checks.
I'm going to turn this one over to our finance director.
So as part of my exit strategy,
Okay, so as part of my exit strategy, I'm trying to keep things as seamless and as smooth as possible. So you'll probably see more of these things come your way. So this is just to put in a formal policy how we handle return checks. Again, this is what we've been doing all along. It's just so that as I slowly make my way out the door, that the next person who's stepping in doesn't have any question as far as how to handle certain things. So do you have any questions on what was written?
Is this policy currently in force?
Yes, it's just what we've been doing. Just didn't have anything formally written down.
Any comments, questions, suggestions?
I had a question on C, that if the return check's not resolved in 10 days, the city will contact DMV for suspension. That seems kind of punitive. Is that?
Well, if the check comes back non-sufficient, then technically your registration is not valid. So we contact the state of Maine, and they take care of it on their end. At that point, it's out of our hands, and they take care of it, and you have to pay them the restitution to reinstate your registration.
So the 10 days is kind of a grace period.
Right, to resolve it with us before we contact them.
Anything else? Thank you. Next item is the presentation of the 2017 budget year-end report.
This was in your packet. I think just to summarize, the city spent roughly $384,000 less than we anticipated expending, and we took in roughly 50,000 more than we anticipated as far as revenues. So from that standpoint, the city did pretty good last year in 2017. The difference between those is $434,759. That typically goes into the rainy day fund. But as we look at the 2018 budget, we do anticipate that probably not all of that amount is going to be able to stay in the rainy day fund, but in order to try to limit the impacts to the mill rate, we may leverage some of that revenue or that difference and apply that into the revenue for 2018 and help with that.
Any questions?
This is about the third or fourth year that we've had a rather large excess at the end of the year. You know, I think we need to start scrutinizing our budgeting a little bit more in the future. And in turn, we need to be starting to watch our overages too, because that. And do we have, AKA, a rainy day fund, and not just general revenue? Specifically.
Our undesignated fund balance.
Huh?
Our undesignated fund balance,
You
is
can-
that what you're referring to?
You can have a reserve fund or for rainy day, and you can capture so much money every year out of your, up to 5%, okay, to establish your rainy day fund, all right? Do we specifically have a reserve account identified as
Yes.
that?
Yeah,
Or does everything just go into the general fund?
Our undesignated fund balance is.
Undesignated, so it's not designated. So if you designate it, then you can save up to 5% a year, and then that would be used for that purposes, and then anything above and beyond that should go to reduce taxes, and we don't have to have that argument every year. And that was one of the points I made a couple of years ago, and again last year, is that if you identify it and establish what your level wants to be for your rainy day fund, then anything above and beyond that can come out of that and reduce taxes the following year.
Anything else? Yes, thank you. Next item is the draft 2018 budget revenues.
Wanted to just highlight for the council some of the numbers that we're looking at for next year. The column on the right that has the line in purple color there. What you're looking at on the far right is the percentage difference in anticipated revenue for the general funds. And so you can see for the most part we're projecting a reduction in some of those revenues. The largest difference in the positive is with the airport, Fund 60. We're estimating $8,000 of revenue at the airport, and that's because of the new leases that we'll have for the 6-bay T-hangar project. So that's why you're showing almost a 6,000% increase in revenue there. Right now we only get $138 a year from the airport, but having those new hangars will significantly help with that fund. Overall, we've projected at this point that property taxes would stay the same. And then all the rest of, and that is the major component of the top line or our general government line. Excuse me. And so you can see the year end for 2017 was just a little over 6.5 million. For 2016 it was just over 6.3 million. We're projecting close to the 6.5 million again for 2018 for general government. And that includes our property taxes, the fees for services, and again, property tax is the bulk of that one. The municipal I think one of the main questions I want to bring up with you tonight as far as the revenues are concerned is the health and sanitation line. That has historically been shown as zero, but occasionally we will get a disbursement from the Tri-Community landfill. They might have years where they've just done really well, and being an owner of the landfill, we may get a disbursement back. In 2017, we received a check for $260,000, which right now we've just reserved because we want to have the discussion with the council as far as what the intentions would be for that funding. We haven't shown it as a revenue in the 2018 budget. There's been discussion of taking that $260,000 and letting it stay in reserve and helping offset maybe future increases to the cost of landfill use as a way, again, of helping reduce the long-term expenses of the city. The other item that we would have is...
Have we received that yet?
Yes.
In 2017?
Yes. Because we put it directly into a reserve account, it's not shown as a revenue here.
It should, so you know where it came from.
Well, we've labeled it Tri-Community, so we at least have the tracker,
so
but
we
we
know
can.
where it came from.
Well, it was a revenue from last year,
Right,
and this is just a projection for this year.
Right.
So you can't project anything.
yeah, but you can show the revenue is what I'm saying. That's all. And then have a discussion.
So the other
I
one.
put it in there now, I'm just saying it should
Right.
be there.
Right. The other funding that we have was from the RSU 39. We received a sum of money, roughly $140,000 last year, which is supposed to go to help offset the mill rate. And we did receive that check as well, and just half of it. Right. The other half will come later this year. But again, it's a question of how do we want to utilize those funds. It needs to go toward educational purposes or reduction of the mill rate. And so there's a question of, do we simply get the final number from the school district, what they need this year, and then we take that money and we offset it directly? Or do we, in a sense, give it back to the school district to reduce their request? Or do we use it to reduce our request? And we have to work out all the details for how that would happen. But again, that $140,000, what do we want to do with that?
So did we get that last year also?
We got the 70.
Got it today.
Got it today, for last year.
But, correct, but it's gonna be deposited for each.
Right.
We'll see in 2000.
And then we'll get another check in July? And that's approximately about the same amount?
Well, the total amount will be that 140,000.
So you got 70 today.
About 70 today.
That's, okay, all right, thank you.
Right. So these numbers right now don't include anything from Tri-Community, and they don't include those dollars from the RSU 39. Okay. So as far as the enterprise funds are concerned, the economic development, housing, snowmobile, and the FSS, where those dollars they're basically set with the mill rate or from the federal funds that we get for those, and so we're just showing those basically staying the same. A slight reduction on the snowmobile, a slight increase to the FSS, but for the most part, what we're showing is all the funds combined, a slight reduction in revenues for 2018.
Approximately the same.
Yeah, the 2017 budget was 9.9 million, and this is basically 30,000 short of that.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8, other business. Any councilors have other business? Mr. Vaughn.
Do we vote on the 2017 final expense budget?
That was done in
That was
December.
Pardon?
That was already done back in December.
It was done in December. There was no adjustments or anything, we got it all done in December. Okay. Would I get a copy then, please, of the final ledger, city ledger,
I think
for the
we've
month
got a
of
copy.
December?
Do you want the year-end financials? The end of the year, or you want the
Yes.
budget?
For the way we ended the year, the ledger accounts.
Yep, are you bringing that up to the next meeting for approval?
Yeah, thank you. Can I get a copy, please, of the 2016 city audit?
Okay, I have an item on other business. I've been approached by several community members wondering what the city council's policy was on the use of cell phones by council members during a meeting. And we don't have a policy on the use of cell phones by the city councilors during the meeting. Do we need a policy? What are our thoughts?
All turned off, not in use.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Manager?
Just maybe a matter of discussion. The concern, I think, is that any dialogue that happens in a council meeting, particularly where it's being broadcast, should be open to the public and know what's going on. I know some communities have kind of slapped the councilors' hands because councilors might be texting each other across the table in the middle of a meeting, or how are you going to vote, or whatever. But the same can be true with the public texting the council members in the middle of the meeting, and that not being open to the public as well. And so it's just a question of what you as a council want to set as a standard for yourself, and again, trying to be as open to the public as possible in your meetings.
Shut them up. I don't need it.
So could you write up a policy?
We can,
We can vote on it next meeting?
okay? Is that, just shut them off? No,
The public can have theirs on, but for recording purposes only. They're not supposed to be used or where they could be distracting the meeting or anything like that, and that's in the public proceedings guidance. Okay? So if they want to sit out there and record it, they can, as long as it's not disruptive.
Any other business? We have next council meeting will be February 12th. And Councilor Cody will be running that meeting, as I will not be here. Executive sessions, we have executive session?
if we may, under Title 1, Chapter 13, Section 405E, and also under C and A, if we could.
Yep. Do we have to vote?
You need to move into.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, we will now be going to executive session.
Mayor, can I ask that Chief Susie and Gary be allowed to stay?